Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Cliff Central House. Thank you, Jack, for that very, very funny joke. I hope that's the last of the jokes for the evening. But yes, as Jack mentioned, tonight we are here to have an interesting discussion. I hope it'll be a challenging discussion that'll really get us thinking and, you know, asking ourselves things that maybe we've ignored in the past and maybe things that we've walked on eggshells about. I'm hoping that this evening we can really just get like right to the grittiness of it all. As Jack mentioned, my name is Lebang Kgosana. I am a creative momtrepreneur. I am the host of the Life with Lebang podcast, which actually started right here at Cliff Central. So it feels so good to be back home and to see the crew and everybody again. I'm also an award-winning broadcaster, amongst other things, a mother of 6 fantastic kids. And I'm very, very excited to be here tonight to be moderating such an important conversation. So I'm going to be introducing our panel. As you can see, there's only 2 of them, but there will be a third who will be joining us very, very shortly. So I'm just going to introduce everybody tonight. Before I do that, the topic for this evening is women in politics. As you can see, there are some very beautiful women on the panel. So we decided just to, you know, put a little bit of a pizzazz on the panel tonight, you know, and really get a variety of perspectives. So I will start with Tessa Dooms, who is sitting next to me here. Tessa is a director at the Rivonia Circle. She's also an author of a recently released book called Coloured, and that explores identity politics in South Africa. And next to Tessa, I have Craig Wilkinson, who is the founder and CEO of Father a Nation. He's also a best-selling author of Dad Coach and an activist for positive masculinity and gender equality. So thank you both for being here this evening. And our third guest, Anele Mda, when she gets here, obviously, ta-da! Anele, please join us. Give her a round of applause. Talk about timing.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. I think there's a bit of a theme going on tonight. Oh, yeah. And we didn't plan this. We did not plan this, I promise. Anele Mda is a global speaker, activist, and change maker. She served in Parliament as one of the youngest members and is now an independent candidate in the upcoming election. I hope you've all registered to vote. It's going to be one of the most important elections of our time. And part of the reason why we're doing what we're doing, right? So I'd like to welcome all of you to this episode, and I hope that we're going to really get some interesting things out of this evening. So I'll kickstart with just a very generic, open to all of you conversation, or rather question, where are we right now in this moment, politically, and also as women, what's it looking like in this moment? What's politics like for women, basically? Any of you can take that one.
I'll definitely defer to you on that one.
All right. Okay, is my mic on?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and my apologies for being a few minutes late. Roadworks, accidents, all the works on the road. To answer your question, we are at a threshold of a very pertinent reflection that must be done by all citizens. And this reflection must really be, must encompass a whole lot of the future that we must aspire to have a vision of. And that future must be a future that we know, even when we are not there, that future will be there. And for me, I think the most catastrophic, collapsing thing when I think about the state of South Africa currently is the extent of the level of us being unbothered about the things we ought to be very concerned about. I mean, you do not break a country, a great country like ours, break it to all the small particles of it perishing right in our full view, and you sense that there's also, you know, this silent way of having created a complacency amongst us as citizens that says, we don't have to really think things are that bad. Yet they are bad. We see them, we experience them, we feel them. I mean, there's a whole lot of a trajectory of difficulty in almost every single strata and sphere in our country. Whether you are a successful business person who's running a big conglomerate, there's no way you would say where your business stands in 2024 is where it stood in as far as its annual returns, its prospects of being successful, expanding, and a whole lot 10 years ago. That on its own, for me, is a measure of how broken the country is getting, but also how we are giving a leeway to the political authority to just, go uncalled into action and not being accountable, but also over and above that, I think we're at a state where there is a call for action to all of us.
Sure. Whew.
Amen.
Thank you. That is a lot to take in, but also so very true.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, are we talking about women in politics, or are we talking about politics in general? I think that was a very general, but look, for me, the jury's no longer out with regard to South Africa. The jury's back in, and the verdict's guilty. Things are broken.
Sure.
So many state enterprises are absolutely broken. For me, one of the greatest tragedies in this nation is the poverty, and the Gini coefficient, the gap between the rich and the poor, is the worst in the world. And I mean, that's an absolute travesty. We've got so many poor people that are already struggling, and it's heartbreaking. So it's wonderful to see passionate firebrands like yourself coming in and saying, let's fix this thing.
Yeah.
You know what blows me away about South Africa? We work in communities around South Africa, rich and poor, and wherever I go, I find beautiful people, beautiful men, beautiful women, with a heart to do amazing things. And I can't help get the feeling that there's something simmering underneath the surface in South Africa where, I was at Home Affairs the other day, and there was a beautiful lady there reading her Bible and serving me. And we started talking about scripture and whatever. And we just got into this, and she just had a passion for service. And so we've got the people in South Africa that are beautiful, amazing, phenomenal. But somehow they're not where they should be in terms of making the decisions for our nation. So it's a beautiful country with so many beautiful people from all backgrounds, and we need to unlock and unleash and mobilize these beautiful humans. When it comes to women in politics, I'm firmly of the belief we don't have enough in South Africa. And we have, in the important ministries, there aren't enough women at the top. And what women do bring to it is a level of compassion, a lack of ego. Not all women. Some women have big egos. Would you agree?
Most definitely.
But generally, there's talking about the male-female thing. Every one of us is alive today because a man got together with a woman, and they co-created us. And that's how the world works. We need a co-creation. The masculine, the feminine coming together as partners, not in war, not in opposites, not in either or, in a both-and situation, and co-creating the future.
Yeah.
So South Africa needs radical change, and we need to co-create.
Yeah. Well, the time is now for that radical change.
Yeah.
Tessa, where are we as women in politics right now?
Yeah, so I think where we are with women in politics is where we are with politics in general. Is that we are very demoralized. And we really, like, our sense that things are bad and things are wrong is there. But the bigger problem is that we don't feel like we have the ability to fix it. We are really demoralized about whether it can be fixed and who will fix it and all of that. And the other problem that we have is we're waiting for somebody to come and fix it.
Sure.
And we're all looking around and looking at each other and going, who's going to do it? Is it going to be you? Who's the next Mandela? All of that. And that speaks to us being demobilized. So we're demoralized because we don't feel like there's an answer, but we're also demobilized because we don't feel like we can actually get together and fix the thing.
Disempowered.
We're disempowered.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is a signifier for all of us in the country, right? So we can talk about where are women in politics, but where are all of us in politics?
Sure.
We've had the same faces, parties, people in this country for 30 years in a democracy that has the ability through the power of the vote to change that. Yet we've been staying out, not only as voters, and we've been staying out in voters en masse, right? In the 2019 election, there were 26 million people registered out of about 35 million that could have been registered, right? But only 16 million showed up. In 2021, there were 40 million of us who were over the age of 18. Still only just about 26.5 million registered. And only 12 million of us showed up. So even at the point of voting, we are not showing up for ourselves. Never mind raising our hands. Never mind raising our hands to lead, raising our hands to fix the problem. So we're all waiting for somebody else to vote, for somebody else to stand, for somebody else to fix, for somebody else to back themselves. And we've become too complacent at the idea that it's somebody else's job to fix this thing.
Sure.
And so I say that that's true for women in politics because it's true for everyone in politics. And so even in a country where we've made strides in many ways in terms of our conversation around gender and women's participation, and especially in politics, to be absolutely fair, right? Your major political parties have all committed to what they call the zebra model to make sure that there's equal amounts of men and women that go into parliament. So we're doing all of the right things cosmetically. In fact, I think there are more ministers who are women than men. But that's not the core of the issue.
Sure.
The core of the issue is, who are these people and do they actually care? Women or men? Are they there because we're putting on a show? Or are they there because they are actually there going to be there to impact and change things?
Yeah.
And so I think that we need to start to take stock and ask, is it enough to just have representation if even that is still not leading to the kind of outcomes that we need? Or do we need to start thinking about how do we as a society start expecting more from ourselves, from our representatives, and getting more out of it at the end of the day?
Yeah.
We have a patriarchal society that you can't paste over by just having more women in the room and more women's faces in the room. If that's not going to change the outcomes for women in society, if it's still going to mean that more women are unemployed than men, that more women are heading single homes that are in poverty than men, then what was the point?
Sure.
We're doing a lot of performativity in our democracy, and we're not getting the results.
Sure. Thank you, Tessa. Depth. It's so real to hear you say it like that, because in our everyday lives, you're almost exposed to how real it actually is. And I love that Anele brought up how we're not doing enough, and you had the same sentiments, because I was going to ask, what can we do? As a South African citizen, I'll be honest, we're not doing enough. We're sitting on our phones, we're fighting online and saying, but what are we actively doing to participate in getting to where we need to be and getting to that beautiful place, that beautiful people that South Africans are? How do we elevate and get to that? I want to talk solutions, practical solutions for the everyday South African who's sitting at home and saying, I know, Mandela 2.0 is not going to do this. I have to do this. How can we, change the thinking of that person who wants to do something, but maybe just doesn't know where to start?
I think the first thing for me is a very simple one. It starts with, remember, as people, we've got those respective allegiances of loyalty that we have to different people that we see in society, that we give a particular recognition to as a result of things that they have done, or as a result of things that we have been told they did, and the endearment that we then get towards them is as a result of all those things, the combination of what we know, what we have seen, and also things that we are told that they did, right? But I think at the core of what we ought to do is not getting the loyalty to the individual on the basis of what I'm told they did for this country, go above the loyalty that I have to the country. Because once we're able to deconstruct the level of importance and the order of priority of where Anele, as a citizen, is accountable to first. Am I accountable to people that I'm told they are liberation struggle heroes who brought us freedom, or am I accountable to a country that will exist even after the departure of these liberation struggle heroes? And understanding that these are liberation struggle heroes, what is it about their serving of the country that it says to me? What's emulatable about what they did? And if I identify that there's something that I ought to take from their leadership, I must take that to serve the country like they did. Sure. I should not take anything from a leader who sacrificed for the country. And I take anything out of them and serve them at the expense of the country. I think where the conundrum is at is that we are so entangled in understanding and hero worshipping the persona in the art of serving, rather than serving the sacrifice of what the service was for. For me, the service was for the country, right? And the country was to be delivered to a certain departure trajectory that was going to enable us to move to a certain, to a level that we would at least say, from here, an ongoing, objective, progressive work can begin, because we have been delivered, right? We are stuck where we were delivered. We do not want to start a conversation that says, having been delivered where we are, no matter how imperfect where we got delivered is, there's something that we can start with. And that something that we start with is recognizing the sacrifices of these people that we say they led the way. But we must also be able to say leading the way was not to mean they must at some point hold us at ransom. And we must not be able to say when they are no longer on the journey of serving, they are rather reversing the gains of what we at first celebrated. We must not stand up and call them into order. Sure. And I think that's the problem that we are facing, because when you begin to ask, what is this attachment and deep endearment that we have to political parties? You have no business calling the name of Oliver Tambo in 2024. What in the dishonor of such an honorable man are you calling his name for? In a country that is being destroyed by the people who uses his only name to justify the breaking of our country into what it's becoming. The future that Oliver Tambo would have wanted for South Africa, do you see it? So when do we cut the cord of our allegiance to individuals that have started reversing the gains of this democracy and begin to say, thank you very much. From this point, the baton belongs this side.
Sure.
And if it's not handed over, we shall gladly grab it and move, because there's a country that must be served. There's people that must rise. There's a history, a new history that must be written. We're not going to always speak about the 1989, the 1985, the 1976. We must have a new 1976 that is of a different epoch, that is defined differently, but has got the very same, if not similar outcome, that it inspires us to continue knowing that the journey that began is far from over. The people that are inside this current journey must be inspired by the ones that led the previous journey. Sure. But this journey is not ours. We are also entrusted with a phase that we must take care of, because this is about, for me, it's a phase where we call watering the seeds. The generation that planted the seed is no more. Ours is to water this seed, and we can't water the seed with the water that have been muddied by the very people that we thought, when they planted the seed, they knew that the harvest will not belong to them.
I wish my gran was here to hear that. Like, Gogo, this is for you. That is very deep and very true. And it's that loyalty, that what are you actually loyal to and what for, that really speaks, right? And that's the thing that makes the most noise. Craig, the work that you do on the ground,
right.
You engage with South Africans on the daily, and just to bring it back to the question, what is it that average South Africans, everyday South Africans can do to get more involved actively, to participate in this getting to the next level? Considering the work that you do on the ground every day,
right.
What advice can you give to that person who's watching and listening right now?
Well, I just want to add one thing to what you said. I mean, you can never inherit the moral high ground. You've got to earn it. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Each new generation has to earn the moral high ground. And I think, we ride on the laurels of what happened in the past. We can't do that. You've got to re-earn it right now. And I think that's the stage we're at. Each one of us has to make that happen. Look, on the ground, as I said, amazing human beings, but so disillusioned we are as South Africans. So disillusioned, so disempowered. We come across so many men in communities that have knocked on 1,000 doors to get work, and there's no work, and they become completely disillusioned. Turn to alcohol, turn to abuse, all kinds of stuff. And, not that that's an excuse, but there's a reason for it.
Sure.
And that's devastating. That really is. So we do a lot of work with empowering. We give the message to men that even if you don't have a job, you can still be a man. You can still love, you can still serve, you can still do stuff around the house, you can still contribute positively to the community. So I think the message we need to give very strongly to each individual is that you can make a difference regardless of your circumstances. One of our mentors was talking to a female judge, and he asked her, he said, what do you attribute your success to? And she actually teared up and she said, to my father. And she said, he was a poor man. For a lot of our lives, we grew up in a shack. And she said, but every morning when I got up to go to school, he had gotten up before me, boiled the water for me to wash. Every time I came back from school, he was there to meet me at the door. And that was my success. And it makes me think of what one guy said. He said, sometimes the poorest man can leave behind the richest legacy. So it's not about the funds you have and the finances. It's about what you contribute and what you give. So I think we need to really start giving the message to every man and woman that you are significant. Your life matters. You can have a huge impact on the people around you, regardless of your circumstances. And that does mean becoming empowered to vote, empowered to become a community activist, empowered to be a present and engaged father, empowered to be a present and engaged mom. I mean, single moms in this nation are heroes. I mean, they're absolute heroes. In some communities, 74% of kids are growing up without a present, engaged father. And who's carrying that weight? It's the single moms and the grannies. And, sometimes working a double shift and working very hard and still raising the kid. So the level of encouragement we need to give the average citizen of South Africa to say, wow, you're amazing. You've done amazing. The other thing I want to say is we've become so polarized as a world. Identity politics is so damaging because what it does is it places your identity in superficial things like ethnicity and gender, and as opposed to humanity.
Sure.
I mean, those things are flavors of our humanity, but they're not our primary identity. And so we often have a war. We have the gender war, we have the race wars, we have, the fact that you had to write a book called Colored. I mean, it's all about we're not honoring humanity. We are still placing people in boxes. And I think going back to what you were saying politically, we're still divided along racial lines, along ideological lines in terms of, and what makes a great man or a great woman is the ability to see the truth in the other tribe. And by tribe, I mean any identification, whether it's female, male, gender, whatever, the truth in the other and the falsehood in my own. So when my tribe is screwing up, I need to be able to acknowledge that and say, look, my tribe's, and wow, that tribe who maybe I'm not a member of, look at the truth, because then we're going beyond identity and we're going into humanity. So a lot of encouragement. We also need, I think, to focus, but this happens at more of a policy level, very much more on families, on restoring fathers to households, restoring the nuclear family, which is the foundation of a society. So much to be done.
Thank you, Craig. Yeah, we've got a lot of work to do, but I'm so glad that you ended off by speaking on the family structure, because that is a very, very big part of how we are where we are today, I believe, because so much is learned in the household, so much is, we spend so much of our time in the household as children especially, and it's very sad when you think about how little time parents can actually be with their children. A lot of the children end up getting raised by the streets, the children end up getting raised by the internet, especially the children of today, which is really scary because do we even know what the consequences of being raised by the internet really is, or are we still figuring that out? So it's scary to be a parent in this day and age, but it's also our duty to be present, to be active, to be engaged, and to be intentional when it comes to raising our kids, because you can be the decider as far as what kind of child am I going to raise. Am I going to raise a child who's going to be aware of their surroundings, encouraged, strong, confident, or do people like Craig need to come in 30 years later and do my work for me? So shout out to all the parents that are doing the right thing. We see you. But also we encourage more parents to please, just wake up and understand the role that you're playing in your child's life. Tessa, you spoke about the current women that are in politics right now and how little they are doing, or essentially that what they are doing is not resulting in, it's not reflective in society because, women are still at the bottom of most of these lists in any case. What kind of improvement would you like to see? Particularly, what kind of work would you like to see the women that are currently in politics doing? And also, how do we make politics more fashionable for women? I'm of the belief that women run the world. we truly can turn something out of nothing. And if politics was more fashionable for women, then maybe more women would be interested in even getting into politics. So what do you think, as the women that are currently in politics, what more can they do so that we can get a direct reflection of that work being done?
Sure. So I want to start somewhere where Craig
Please.
left off before I answer your question
Sure.
directly. So for me, what we need to do as a society is we need to broaden our view on what democracy and politics is, right? We think of democracy very narrowly as voting, number one, and then having representatives and having a court and institutions, and then we say we have a democracy. So some of the work we do at the Rivonia Circle is we run a project called the Democracy Builder. And it's a one-day workshop that we run with people that starts with a conversation about what democracy, governance, and politics is, and ends with people starting projects in their community in one day. And so I cite that because one of the things that's become clear in our conversations when we speak to people about what democracy is that we have a conceptualization of democracy that is outside of ourselves.
Okay.
When actually democracy means the people shall govern themselves, right? Now, there's a difference between governance and government. And we think that democracy happens and the governance of the people happens in government. But actually, governance is something we do all the time, every day, right? So running a household is governance. Running a school is governance. Parenting is governance. So the people shall govern themselves is not about government. It's about all of us participating in governance. Now, the extent to which we feel disempowered is none of us feel like we have the power to even decide about what's happening in our own households. We don't feel like we have the power to decide what's happening in our street. And we keep waiting for somebody else from the outside to come and do something about what's happening in my house, or in my street, or in my community. We're having the conversation about parenting and families. In a country where we have, on the expanded definition of unemployment, about 44% of adults are unemployed, right? That's on the expanded definition. People have time. Those fathers, they have time. They could be parenting more actively, but how do they do that when they don't have food, when they don't have the things that they need in order to parent, right? And the people who don't have time because they're working. And they have to take 4-hour commutes back and forth. So they don't have time to govern their households. Because we've created a society that doesn't enable people to govern themselves. We've created a society where we outsource governing to somebody else, and we keep everybody else busy making money for someone else. We have to change the way we think about a democracy by saying that a democracy is measured by the extent to which people are empowered to govern themselves, not just to vote for someone to do something. So that's the first thing. Then we ask people in the middle of our workshop to do what we call South Africa 2.0. And we ask them to upgrade the democracy we have and upgrade the country we have and to imagine a better future, a better society. And that's always where the conversation shifts. Because, number one, we don't know what kind of society we're trying to create. We are all busy building South Africa, but none of us have consulted each other on the building plans. So you're building a 2-room, you're building a mansion, you're building a lodge. But we all say we're building South Africa and we're wondering why we're not getting somewhere. We need to become a country in conversation with each other about what kind of society we're trying to create. And have the courage to be the ones who have the imagination to say what must be done.
Yeah.
We're in an election season. We have left the mandate around what this election is about to politicians and their manifestos and waiting for it.
Yes.
We have not told them what we want. We're waiting to hear what they want. That's not how you hire someone. An election is about hiring politicians. Nobody who ever hires somebody waits for the person to come to the interview to tell them what they'd like to do for the company. We do that because we don't have the courage and the imagination to say what it is we want and mobilize for it. And so the final part of our democracy builder is we ask people to design a 6-week project to fix something in their communities.
Yeah.
We've done 100 democracy builders in the space of 2 years, and 61 of those projects have become sustainable projects.
Wow.
Based on a 1-day workshop.
Sure.
There's a community that didn't have a clinic for 27 years, that within 5 weeks had a clinic.
Wow.
Within 5 weeks, without a politician in the room. We have to start building confidence in ourselves to be part of the solution. And so to answer your question more pointedly about the role of women in politics, number one, women need to crowd in on the things they care about. We must crowd in on the issues we care about. We must start identifying the issues that we care about. Put those issues on the table. And whether it's a man who's president or it's a woman who's president, that man or woman or person must care about women's issues. But they can't care about it if we don't identify them and don't mobilize for them. The election is an opportunity for us to mobilize people who are like us, our tribes, as Craig called it. As women, we are more than 50% of the electorate. More than 50% of people are registered. If we made this election about women's issues, we could be a very big deciding factor on who gets in and who doesn't. And then the second thing is that we must do is we must demand to lead.
Yeah.
And I say demand to lead. Not wait to be given, not wait to be asked, not wait to be empowered. Empowerment is not a real thing, guys. I already have power. What I need is space. What I need is for you to get out of my way and not make me earn the right to lead.
Sure.
Where I lead, come and follow. That's all.
Sure. Like, can we do some finger snapping or some clapping? That one came from the stomach. I could feel that. No, that one it's a real one. And you know, a lot of people will just be uncomfortable if you walk into a room and you say what you just said. People will be like, "How dare you speak so loudly and so proudly about something?" But we need more of that. We need more people to just barge into boardrooms and say, "Here I am. This is the space. I'm about to tell you what's about to happen." Anele, I want to ask you the same question, particularly about women in politics and the women that are currently in politics and what they are or are not doing, and how we can, you know, encourage more women to try and, you know, step into the space.
All right. I believe strongly that, first of all, women are not leaders because there's a man who has led them. They are leaders because their space in society cannot be replaced. It cannot be overshadowed. It cannot be taken. But the difficulty that we find ourselves in is that we have gotten used to the tokenism that happens in women. And when that tokenism happens, it finds some amongst us being okay with it. And the tokenism happens as in two ways. It happens as a destructive tool to neutralize women in grasping their issues. But it also happens as a way of ensuring that when we need to silence the strong opposing voice, which will emerge from the side of the women, we don't have to go and get the difficult ones. We will plant our own. So you become a created gatekeeper for the real voices. And when you have become that gatekeeper, you are not even mindful of the fact that you have had your own leadership destroyed. Because you cannot come back and be a leader assertively. Because there are people who took away the fact that you are a woman leader. They made you to be an imposter for the big boys. When we need to speak to women, we will only address Anele because Anele represents that token group that we have replaced. But here is a biggest gain for me by having women who are tokens. The gain is that it exposes women to understanding deeper how patriarchy will never shift its force, it will never change its methodology, and it will never be about a universal recognition of the value of leaders that lies outside of the masculinity of a man. Because when you are inside and you are this imposter token, you get spoken to in a manner that disqualifies you as a leader. So you're reminded that you are inside because we put you here so that we can tick the box.
Sure.
You are not the it. We brought you so we can be able to quell the fire. And I always say, women, up until we reach a point where we are not so comfortable with this line of, I was the first. I hate that line so much. Maybe I hate it because I'm a product of poverty. There's nothing first about poverty. You are all, product of a same thing. So it removes the chip on the shoulder. And I think when women move away from celebrating the first anything, we will grasp the fact that no woman breaks something that they know how hard it is to fix.
Sure.
A leader who calls themselves a leader but can break a country, you must know they will never come back to fix it. And women, when they wait for politicians to recognize them, they are not doing disservice to women leaders. They are rather killing the next generation of leaders that must emerge. I mean, how do we explain to ourselves? We once saw President Thabo Mbeki taking Umama Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka and put her as the deputy president of this country. How did we not seize that moment and forcefully hold that office and say we will never have a male deputy president again? This office will be occupied strategically by a woman force who will represent the formidability of the impeccable leaders that South Africa has produced in the form of women. How did we let go of that office? Because we have lowered the bar. Because we're preoccupied with becoming the first this and the first that. Over and above becoming that first this and that first that, we are very good in being cheerleaders to people who destroy the agenda. Because our agenda as women is not for us to benefit. Our agenda is a societal agenda. There's no woman who stands up to shape themselves. A woman stands up to shape her community, her nation, her people. And I'm saying, one of the things that we need to do is to recognize ourselves as women, that we are leaders who must not wait for this affirmation, because this affirmation that we're waiting for, it comes with terms and conditions. In politics, a lot of people had said to me, you came to politics when we were very young. How is it possible that you managed to retain your independence? You have never been a captured person, both by factions within political parties, but generally by factions in the country, because even in the country, there are factions. Craig earlier on spoke about racial, tussling and whatnot, or ethnic tussling and all those things. I mean, in the country, you will find people who will say, no, but we can't be told by so-and-so who once did 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that has got nothing to do with politics. It's the factions of the country. We are factionalized even in the country. And when people ask me, how is it possible that even when you emerge from within political party hegemony, you have never been a person who has been caught by factions? I think my answer has always been consistent, the one that says, I've never wanted to be a leader who will wake up one day and not recognize herself because I'm carrying someone else's mission. No leader will see me as their conveyor belt for their mission to succeed. Because when I carry another man's or another woman's mission, who's carrying my mission? It means my mission is left unattended. And my sobriety to leadership is always about lead on the things that define first who you are as a leader. Because the art of influence, when you speak to other people, will emerge from the things that shape you as a leader. And that's where women of South Africa at this point in time are lacking.
Sure. Thank you, Anele. Can we please give her a round of applause? Hearing the idea that women are put there as, placeholders and as trophies and tokens is so, so sad. And hearing more so that we have an obsession with being the first woman to do this. How true? Like, I'm sitting here like, yeah, that sounds like us. And I wonder why that is. To think even till now that excites us. That same energy that we're placing into the excitement should be just put into the work. Let's just get cracking. Let's crack on with what we need to do instead of stopping and celebrating in inverted commas this thing that is essentially not that important, and it's hard-hitting truths that I don't know if anybody would actually just be open to hearing and saying, yeah, that's actually right.
Can I add to that, though?
Yeah.
Because I think that there's another part of that dynamic that we're not talking about, which is the idea that we have individualized our politics, right? So the first woman idea is because you want to shine politically. Sure. You want to be you want, not even politically, just in general. We see ourselves as, and even the style of politics that we've chosen, representative politics, it's given way for that. So we don't think about, so we talk about leaders, right? And we've all said the word leader. But in politics, you are a representative. And I think that word representative has been manipulated in terms of you are now the voice for all people who are like you. But then you become the focus, not the people that you represent, right? And represent can either be that you are now the placeholder for those people, or represent can be you are accountable to those people. And so as women, if we, number one, however we get into a space where you're the first this or you did this or that, are you accountable to anyone other than yourself? Are you part of a community outside of yourself, or are you doing what you're doing for yourself? And I think that that's become one of the problems that we've had. We are celebrating nonsense because we are centering ourselves. And we're not thinking about what is the impact of me being here on the ability to change the lives of other people like me. Who am I letting in the room by being a representative? And to take it back to politics, so Anele is one of the few, I think 11 independent candidates in the selection. What the independent candidate question has made us all ask is, who do you represent? We have to ask that question to Anele in a way we don't ask that question to Cyril Ramaphosa. We don't ask that question to political representatives of political parties. Because there's an assumption that you represent someone without having been asked, who do you actually represent? Who are you actually accountable to? And I think that that's something that we need to really reflect on, is who are we actually accountable to? Representing means somebody gave me a mandate to be here. It doesn't mean that I am now the be-all. When you've done for me, you've done for all. I always say to people, I used to work in the youth development space, and I've always said to people, when a young person is at the table and you make them the spokesperson for all young people without asking them what relationship they have to other young people, you are actually taking away power rather than giving it. You're taking away power from millions of other young people because you've tokenized this young person. And the same is true for women. The same is true just for public representatives in general. The reason why accountability is important is that your representation is you are taking a mandate from somewhere else. You are being accountable to someone somewhere else. And we must take that seriously. We must say that it's not enough for just me to be in the room. I am here to make space for other people to be in the room, in fact. My job is to make the room bigger, not smaller. The flex isn't, I was, one of 5 people in this important room that changed the whole country. That's not a flex. It's an elite. You're excited about being an elite. When we actually are trying to create a society that's inclusive, that's open, that brings more people into the rooms, and yet we are taking up space so that we can center ourselves as opposed to change the society.
Corporate South Africa, are you listening?
I'd love
Craig,
to,
please add.
bring the analogy to the corporate South Africa. And I think the culture that we've created in corporates and in government is wrong, in the sense that a lot of research in corporate has shown that certain behaviors in women are penalized and certain behaviors in men are penalized. So the behavior that's penalized in a woman is if I'm assertive. If a woman's assertive, she's considered, what's the word?
Too much.
Well, bitchy or whatever. And they are. Women who are assertive in business are and that's why women often get given to go to your tokenism, they get given a seat at the table but not a voice at the table. Because when women are too assertive, they're considered to be too much, exactly. Men are penalized for being too compassionate. A man who's compassionate, kind, caring, and even cries, research shows they don't get promoted. They're considered weak. They're considered not good prospects. Now, that speaks to a culture that's about power and money, not a culture that's around humanity and people. And I think that's what Tessa is saying as well, is that we need to create in government. And the fact that both of you, and you wouldn't find many male politicians doing this, sadly, you're talking about we're creating space for other people. We're here to serve. It's not about power. We were doing some work in KZN and we found we were hiring people and giving a stipend, and we found at the end of the day we gave up doing this with men. We gave the stipend to women, and the reason was one reason alone. A woman would spend it on her children, on food and on education. The men would often spend it on drink and other things. Now that shows, that's not inherent in masculinity. That's inherent in broken masculinity. Because a man who's not broken will take that money and spend it on his kids or his wife.
Sure.
A broken man who has a sense of inadequacy, a sense of brokenness, a sense of total loss of self-esteem needs to find escapes with that money to make himself feel good. So when you have a beautiful balance between the masculine and feminine in politics and in business, you have this balance between power, making things happen, and service, doing it for the community. And I think that's what is so lacking in South Africa. I mean, it's lacking internationally. If we look at the candidates in American, it's all about, it's power. It's power. I want power. And I mean, where this government's gone so horribly wrong is this power at all costs. And what we're saying here is, no, it's not about power. It's about service.
Sure.
It's about being accountable to. It's about the mandate. And if we have that shift, and I'm not sure how we bring it about. I think one of the ways of bringing it about is having more women in politics. One of the challenges with the military and politics, and I compare the two, there's a book written called The Psychology of Military Incompetence. And it talks about how military by its very nature attracts people to it who want to be bullies. Generally, And politics often attracts people who want power. Which is the completely opposite of what it is. I mean, politics is about service. Sure. You're talking about service. It's about service. So we should attract people into politics who want to serve. So the issue of accountability to the mandate of people who vote us is absolutely crucial. Because right now we've got power-hungry people who power at all costs. I don't care what I say to anyone. I don't care who I trample on. And more women in politics will shift and change that. Now, let me just bring a caveat. I love what Solzhenitsyn said. He said that the line between good and evil runs squarely through the center of every human being. It's not restricted to male, female, black, white, Russian, whatever. Every single human being has the capacity for good and evil, and that applies to women and men equally. It manifests differently with women. Women tend to, men will bully with their fists and violence. Women will bully with their tongues. And let's be honest. So we need the right candidate, whether male or female, but we need this balance between the masculine and the feminine to move from power to giving, serving, loving. I'm doing it for other people. That's what we need.
Sure. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Anele. Thank you, Tessa. I think I want to open up now to the audience. I think you guys are so in sync. Like there's a vibe and an energy that you're all quite aligned in what you believe and what you live, and that is obviously through your work.
Is that boring?
No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. I mean, you're all wearing blue. We're all wearing blue and white. This is a vibe. We've got a thing going on. But I'd like to open up the floor. There's been a lot that's been said tonight, and a lot of really hard-hitting, kind of questions, or rather topics. So if anybody would like to ask something, the time is now. Don't be shy. This is a safe space. Okay, great. We have a question in the back.
That was fast. I thought he was going to take some while to get to me while I formulate the question. Name is Leah, and my question comes from what you have all said, but particularly something that Tessa said about the consultation that is necessary before people can have a harmonized plan. And then Anele talking about how the tokenism is destroying the project of building and having women lead authentically. Craig, you've mentioned it, but I'll leave you out of it for a while. So to the two ladies, I think the question that I would like to pose, and it came through Craig actually, was how we can utilize what we now know of the dynamics in terms of building a better South Africa. I'll sort of like give a bit of clarity. On the one hand, we see the gatekeeping that's keeping the ladies out. Rather, let me say the women out. On the other hand, we are also seeing what Craig has said in that because of the inherent attraction of power mongers into the spaces, even the women that get in are a very distorted version of what women leaders are supposed to be. But at the same time, I truly believe that any community is a product of the caliber of parenting. So, one, do you think there's some kind of enabling that is happening as some of the single parents, because now I'm harping on single parents because, like somebody pointed out, we are a broken country that has now destroyed the family unit, and we've got an inordinate amount of families being raised by women. But out of these families, we are seeing very toxic males being raised. So that's one. What are we doing that is creating some of that? And it's not just a question of the women that are doing it, it's also the men that are absent. But what are we going to do to start saying, as you are raising the children, are you preparing them to be in a society that reduces the toxicity that starts manifesting when they get to 12, 16, 20? One. Two, as women, what do you think can be done to start grooming as abo mama bo manyano, to say it in a different word? Because I found that women tend to be far better at men in being a group and grooming themselves and moving themselves forward. So what can be done in those spaces to start preparing women to, when they find the space, to take it as representatives, like Tessa said?
Okay, so the first question, I think, Tessa, you can go for it.
Yeah, so I'm going to reduce all of my answers to one thing: money. The answer to all your questions is money. Money. So Craig pointed out something, that we're the most unequal society in the world. We're the most unequal country in the world. Part of what enables the tokenism that Anele talks about is who controls the money, who enables people to be in rooms that are powerful based on money. We see it in corporate, we see it in politics, we see it in all sorts of spaces. When women are more empowered financially, they're able to be more independent in the spaces that they find themselves in, whether that's in corporate, in politics, or even in the home. We've seen it with things around gender-based violence, for example, that women are more able to leave and push back against violence in intimate spaces when they have the resources to do that. So the inequalities that we see at a resource level disempower women in ways that make it very hard for them to own their own power because they're dependent on somebody else. In the political space, right? So one of the things we have to fix about our politics in the next 5 years, other than our electoral system, is our financing of politics. We have left the financing of politics to people in shadows, far away from the realities. Our politics is not being funded by even the middle class. So the middle class will complain about the billionaires funding, but then they will spend their money on a night out and not fund their own politics. They won't fund women in politics. They won't fund independence. They won't fund political parties that they care about. And then they'll complain about the impact that the billionaire has. When we have this resource imbalance, it adds to our other kinds of inequalities and our other kinds of power imbalances. And so I'm making the answer as simple as that because I think there's a pull-through line, right? So you're talking about single parents and how mothers should be raising their children. So the point I was making earlier is how do I, as a mother, who is in a country where I'm probably unemployed, I'm probably precariously employed if I am, I'm probably earning below minimum wage or a livable wage, and I'm probably stretched, and I'm single, because the person I'm supposed to be co-parenting with is either not present or so probably also in poverty. At what point do I have the time to be a parent beyond just making sure that this child doesn't die of hunger? If I had the resources to keep the child's basic needs alive, then you can ask me about what socialization I'm doing for the child. But until I'm at that point, what are you expecting me to be able to do? We are not raising children, we are keeping them alive. That's what's happening. Our whole society, we have single mothers in the main who are just trying to keep their children alive and well. And I will also say that part of that is the dysfunction of the state. Because it's actually the job of the state to ensure that we are all able to be alive and well. But when we allow the state to be dysfunctional, now it is the mother's responsibility, who is a single mother, to do the work of the father, to do the work of the community, and to do the work of the government. I must make sure that my house has electricity because the government's not providing it. I must make sure that my child can go to a good school because my government's not providing it. I must make sure that my child has food because my government's not providing the ability for us to be alive and well. We have gotten to a base level of our ability to create a society here because we're scrambling. The majority of society is scrambling to stay alive. We're getting to a very debased level. And women are bearing a great burden on that because of the disproportionate economic power that women have in the society. We are the most unequal country in the world. And when it comes to our gender inequality, my niece is 21. She was not going to vote in this election until yesterday. And when I asked her why, she said, I don't think politics is going to change the things I care about. When I asked what, as a 21-year-old, she cares about, she said the gender wage gap. I said, that's exactly why you must vote, number one. But number two, she's absolutely right that politics must fix that so that she's able to contribute to society meaningfully. And so my answer is still money. We must get our money right if we want our society to be better.
Sure. Anele, would you like to? Oh, yes.
Thank you for the question. I think, firstly, for me, the issue relating to how do we then deal with this phenomenon of the tokenism of women who are brought inside, and when they are inside, they depart from what the initial struggle ought to have been. I think the most important thing, firstly, is that ourselves as women, we have to get to that discomforting position of removing ourselves from a point of being a tool for anything. It starts there because why is it possible that you see me next to another woman or amongst other women and choose Anele that no, she can serve this mission? What about me was so assuring that I can fulfill an agenda that is anti the very people that I ought to be inside so they can come in as well? So I think that one speaks on us as women, that we have to be very categoric in our leadership. And when we do so, it must be to a point where it must deny us favors. I always say, if your art of leadership has not closed doors for you. You have not led. You have not yet led at all. People must leave you. They must give you labels. They must see you as an aggressive, arrogant, and whatever, because you do not toe the line. When we stop towing the line as women, we understand that Anele's assertiveness is not for her benefit. And Anele's assertiveness in leadership is not for Anele's generation. But Anele's assertiveness in leadership is a footprint of a 2-year-old or a two-month-old girl who will be born, and these footprints will be there to inspire leadership in that woman. And when we remove this, celebration of individual, recognitions, because me this, me that, we will then unearth that solid fire that we ought to understand that the rise of Anele has got nothing to do with Anele's struggles. The rise of Anele is a face of an unseen nation that Anele is putting her face so they can be seen. Anele is putting her voice so they can be heard. Anele is putting a physique so that there can be a recognition that there are people in that direction. We are just not doing enough to go and reach them. And Anele is meeting the journey halfway to say, look to that side. There are people that you are not seeing. There are people that you are not hearing, yet they exist. That's for women to do. On the aspect of the family dynamics and the toxicity that we are producing to the nation, it really is a call for a very deep reflection. You know, I always say, fortunately, I'm a mother of beautiful children. And guess what? None of those children was raised by me and any of the fathers. That's a story for another day. But here is the issue. The family dynamics that we find ourselves in, which manifest in this, deep sense of rage that has taken over our nation, is as a result of a very simple thing that we ought not to be experiencing. The punishing of a present parent for an absent one. The one who failed to understand that there's a child that was brought. And this child never walked to this earth. Neither did one side of the parenting combination bring the child by themselves. Now you get to a space where the imperfections of the present parent get to be punished, yet there's an absent parent who's not even imperfect.
Sure.
The imperfections lack the appreciation because she knows nothing about raising a boy child. I don't know the kind of values and principles that she is imparting in that young boy. Where are you to do your part? And we can change the script and say, for a parent who is raising a child as a single parent, who is a male outside a woman parent, we can say the same. But your question that says, what must be done? We must, all of us, tap into our leadership as parents with a recognition that says, whatever squabbles exist at this level, the seed must not be affected. Because the seed that me and you brought here is a different person who has got a different trajectory in life, that we need to lay a foundation that influences the kind of a product that we want this nation to harvest from. So your principles and my principles will shape this child. But when you are not there in the picture, I will, as Tessa say, I will do whatever is necessary to keep living. And keeping living means I neglect parenting because I am on a survival now. Parenting has not started. That's why you end up with children sometimes who have to parent themselves outside of the spectrum of the family space. But over and above that, we need to recognize that, especially in black communities, there is nothing about an exceptionality of a parent in the form of no woman can raise a child and that child will be good. We need to stop this demonizing of women in things that they have not caused. When women are on a mitigating measure, we must meet them halfway. Don't crush the imperfections. Because if you were to remove these imperfections, you do not know the extent of what will be the outcome of this child in the absence of this imperfect present parent. I think it's very important that we recognize the imperfections, but we must not nullify the presence of the parent who is holding the fort and who is saying, I will mold and nurture this child with whatever that I have. And I will not let go of the responsibility that comes with bearing this child, where the circumstances are so hard and difficult. And I think the toxicity that is happening, the deeper scars that are carried by children who have got absent parents is unexplainable. And it is not a nice thing to have to teach yourself how to heal and explain to yourself things that you are not even supposed to be engaging on by yourself. Because you are trying to parent a child when you are yet an adult because there's a gap that was never filled. So for me, it's important that we do leadership introspection that encompasses all the spectrums that we are supposed to understand, that whether you are parenting, there's a leader that must emerge there. Whether you are supporting as a present or not present, and also I think we must at some point take these conversations as far as how do we also remove the element of thinking that the lack of maintenance in the upbringing of a child and the forcing of the other party to come and bring their responsibility in the upbringing of the child then means the other party must punish the child by not being present in the child's life because, no, your mother demanded that I must maintain you. But this is a child, right? The woman is simply standing there to be the spokesperson of a person who can't speak for themselves and who cannot beg. Tina, we as women, we go to all extremes of dehumanizing ourselves when we stand for our children. So the most important thing for me is that all of us must tap into that responsibility that we have to say, to mitigate from the toxicity that is happening in the production of the children that we're having. Each one of us must hold their responsible line and be a present parent that impart something that can be measurable qualitatively in a child.
Anele took the words right out of my mouth. Sure. Craig, do you want to give it a go?
Yeah, I think, on the issue of parenting,
Sorry, before I answer, I wanted to give the same space that I'd given to our women leaders, but for you, a question that is very specific to your contribution to the conversation tonight. And for me, you identified a very real problem, which is the demonization of men that display a sensitivity and an awareness and a connection to their feminine side. My question to you would be, what can we do to change the landscape, to start creating space for these men, because that's the only time that we'll get a proper balance of men that are not pushing the patriarchy agenda while getting women that can now lead authentically.
Okay. Craig, and then after that, let's get closing remarks from
Okay,
each of
cool.
you, please.
I mean, look, the reality is boys and girls need moms and dads. Full stop. I mean, ideally, a girl needs a father and a mother, and a boy needs a father and a mother. There are questions that I cannot answer that my daughter asked that a woman needs to answer. There are questions that my son asked that his mother cannot answer that a man needs to answer. A father is his son's first hero. A father is his daughter's first romance. You know, as a father, how I treat and raise and love my daughter sets the bar for her expectations of men throughout her life. How I treat her mother plays a massive role. So fathers are absolutely crucial in the lives of their children, and so are mothers, equally crucial. There's a time in a boy's life where he needs his father more than his mother. Now, the tragedy is South Africa, 62% of kids are growing up without a present and engaged father. 62%. In some communities, it's more. Now, that's not the fault of the mother, as Anele says quite clearly. You know, it's a man who's abandoned his post, which is a terrible, terrible thing. The solution is the village. The solution is the village. The solution to single moms is to find and recruit good men into the lives of their sons. Fathers, they can be grandfathers, they can be uncles, they can be older brothers, soccer coaches, tennis, coaches, teachers. Boys and girls need men and women, older men and women, to teach. I often equate masculinity to a motor car. You know, a motor car is a beautiful gift to humanity. You know, we use them every day, but it's also very dangerous. You know, thousands of people die every year in motor car accidents. And in order to drive a motor car, you need someone who knows how to drive a car to teach you. You can't go and get a YouTube clip on how to drive a car and then get out there. You're going to be at chaos on the road. And the same as masculinity. You cannot watch a YouTube clip about how to be a man. You need a man who knows how to drive this vehicle called masculinity to teach and impart to you. And that's where boys cry out to men, please show me how to be a man. And who are boys looking to in the absence of, and this is the cry of millions of single mothers' hearts. Here's my boy. I wish his dad was involved in his life, but he's not. What can I do? Get the village involved, because who does he look to? He looks to gangsters on the street corner. The guys driving the BMW, selling the drugs, and that's where he gets his cues from, or his peers. A young boy cannot teach himself how to be a man. He needs an older man to do that. So absolutely crucial. To answer your other question, men, there are two faces that every man needs to have. I'm not saying he must be two-faced. He needs to wear two faces. The one is the warrior face. There's a time when a man needs to man up, be a warrior, not cry, take it on the chin, make it happen, be strong, be powerful, be resolute, be stoic. Society needs that. Men need to be dangerous, but dangerous for good. If a snake comes into the house, the man needs to confront the snake because it's danger. Anything that's a threat to society, men need to stand up and face. Racism, prejudice, misogyny, abuse, men need to be dangerous to that. Men need to say, not on my watch, it's not going to happen. That's the one side of masculinity. The other side is the lover face. And that's the tender, loving, caring, nurturing ability to be vulnerable face. And if you just have one, you're half a man. If you just have the soft, tender, and look, we're raising soft men at the moment, aren't we? We're raising men that are coddled, men that are not, they're not allowed to be wild and fierce and free, and they need to be. And if we raise it, we're going to get a bunch of soft men, and we're going to have very hard times in the future. And we're also going to have women who have to stand up and be the father and the mother, and they're not supposed to be. And that's politics is very unforgiving, isn't it? I mean, going back to politics. And I think a lot of women come into politics to bring that beautiful touch. But like I think of Mampela Rampela, who came into it with all the right reasons and was burnt badly, because it just... So... the warrior face is absolutely needed, and so is the lover face. And if you have just one without the other, if you just have the warrior face, you're a macho, hyper-masculine, misogynistic man who's not able to be, either one of them is bad. And unfortunately, society gives men the message, grow up, sex, power, money, big boys don't cry. That's the message we grew up with, isn't it? The more women you can have, the more of a man you are, the more power, the more money, and by the way, big boys don't cry. It's absolute, excuse me, can I swear on this thing? Bullshit, Because that's not masculinity. That's half. You need to have the tender, loving, caring, So we need men in society who are dangerous, powerful, strong, but they only use it to serve and to love and to protect and to care and to stand against what's wrong. And I think that's the kind of man we need to model. And boys look to men to model that to them. And where are those men? And so we need more of them.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Craig. I want to do closing remarks because of time and many, many other things. I will start with Anele. If you can just give us your last thoughts, final thoughts. Floor's yours.
Thank you. I think there's an opportunity for a new country to be born out of the reflection of the 30 years of our democracy, inspired by the sacrifices of the past, which gave birth to this democracy that we have. And I think we owe it to ourselves as South Africans to use the foundation of the gains of our democracy to ensure that we build a solid country that works and works for its people. But also, over and above that, we need a stable economy that is able to produce jobs that can be able to see young people being part and parcel of the the evolution of the economy of our country. But also, over and above that, we need strong young leaders that are vociferous, that must not be silenced. We need a nation that is very patient and that is very tolerant to the voices of young people in whatever way that they agitate, in however way they agitate. And we need to have a strong sense of embrace of the next generation of leaders, because when we are no longer here as leaders, as the current folk of leaders, we need people who will safeguard this country, but people who will also work tirelessly to ensure that this democratic project is sustained and it is made reference to and is sacrificed for and is lived, and it leads the people of South Africa to the promised land.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you. Craig, closing remarks?
Truth and love. We need truth and love. And we all need to come to the party, and the podcast party, and that means we bring truth and we bring love. And that means we have adult conversations that we may not agree with each other, we may vehemently, but we bring it with love. Yeah. And if we can do that, we can have an adult, mature society that produces a brilliant future. And let's do that. I mean, the truth can be found in our enemies. And we can love our enemies too.
Sure.
But we need truth and love. And I think when we polarize and when we put each other in boxes, we lose truth and we lose love. And we need to move away from that.
Thank you, Craig. Tessa?
I have a lot to say. So I'm going to try and make four points. 1 point and then 3 calls to action. The first is just to reflect on what Craig was saying about men having that duality. I think that's as true of men as it is of women. Women need to be allowed to have that duality as well, where we are allowed to show up to fight, and we're allowed to show up to love. We're allowed to show up to resist, and we're allowed to show up to show compassion. And again, that goes to a fuller sense of humanity, and a sense that, in fact, gender is not a binary between men and women. It is a continuum between masculinity and femininity, but it's also that masculinity and femininity are constructed by the societies that we are in. We can decide what it means to be masculine, and we need to decide that we're going to produce productive masculinities. And so I think that there's a broad conversation that we need to have about how we construct those masculinities and femininities, and how we give each other grace and space to move on that continuum. And then I have 3 calls to action for women in politics. The first thing is that we all realize on the 29th of May, as women, we are all women in politics that day. We all have to have a political voice, we all have something to say politically, and we must go out and say it. As more than half of the electorate that is registered, women must all show up if we care about the country. Your politics that day, your role in politics that day, is to be a voter. That is also being a woman in politics. So all women should show up. The second thing is that we must have an agenda that we're showing up for. And let's start to talk to each other as women about what our agenda is and what it is we're asking of the politicians that we're sending into parliament to go and do for women, whether they're women or men. They must have an agenda for women that we impose on them. It was the feminist movement that said that the political is personal. And so the political is not about who gets positions. It's about the personal things that happen in our personal lives every day that must be the agenda of the policymakers. And we must all make sure that that is done. And then the third call to action is vote for women, but raise your hand to be a woman that's voted for. In the future, we must get more women to raise their hands, not women to be told that they must come and take up a space. But we must encourage women to raise their hands, and as women, we must raise our hands.
Thank you, Tessa. Right, and that's another episode of Democracy Unplugged, Women in Politics. Thank you very much to Tessa, Craig, and Anele for joining us this evening and being on the panel. I believe it was a very insightful conversation. I also believe that now we can all go home and really rethink who we're going to be voting for on the 29th of May, right? Thank you for to the audience for joining us this evening. It's been very, very wonderful hosting you here at the Cliff Central House. And we will be back very soon with yet another episode. Don't go anywhere. More politics, more information, more great conversations. My name is Lebang Kgosana, and it's been very, very lovely being with you this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.